My name's Chris Eckel. I'm the facilities manager with Arnold Golden Gregory. Um, Big office in Atlanta, Georgia, and a growing office in Washington, D.C. Been here about 5.5 years. Also, for about 4 years, I have been on the board of the IFMA LIC, which is Legal Industry Council, as the vice president and secretary. We've got a super great relevant presentations by our sponsor, Forrest Solutions. As you can see from the title, How Smarter Record Strategies Unlock Space, Security, and Savings for Law Firms. Bill, you could do the next slide. A big thank you, first of all, to Forrest Solutions Legal, who's a gold sponsor. For the IFMA LIC, we rely heavily on our sponsors for financial, input to the LIC. Recommend that everybody use these folks whenever you can. Other sponsors are Maptician and Fortress Consulting. Do a couple little housekeeping items. So the webinar is being recorded, will be posted on ifmalic.org and a couple of other platforms. Forrest Solution will have a recorded webinar for us to send out to all of our LIC members. Everybody will be put on mute once we start the program. During the presentation, feel free to post questions in the chat section or the raised hand area, and we will address those as we go. We will have a Q&A also at the end of the presentation. And I really want to just thank Forrest Solutions again. They've done webinars and roundtables for the LIC, I think 2 or 3 times before. They're always right on the front end of what's going on with law firms. So with that being said, I want to introduce 2 folks with Forrest Solutions. Casey Polk is the vice president. Casey is the VP of Operation and Information Services. Also, Andrew Bikowski has a fancy title as well. He is the VP of Legal Services at Forrest Solutions. Both these guys are certified information governance professionals, which is impressive, both ARMA members. Casey focuses on the scanning and on-site, off-site records, been with Forrest Solutions for many years. Andrew's also very well versed in this subject. He is a JD, I guess a non-practicing attorney. He's in e-discovery, and he's been at Forrest Solutions as well. So we got 2 great people to bring us up to speed on the latest and greatest with IG and records. So thanks again, Forrest Solutions, and I will turn it over to you guys.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate the introduction. We're excited to be presenting to this group, so thank you all for attending. We hope this session is informational and educational, and hopefully you get some good takeaways. The main focus of our presentation today is going to be on digitization efforts and the value that can come with those, how that digitization and reducing your physical record footprint can reduce costs and reclaim valuable space. We'll kind of address how this all is nestled underneath the bigger umbrella of information governance, with more of a traditional focus on physical records and ways to digitize them and the value that comes with that. We'll start off with a quick go over the problem of paper. I'm sure everybody on this call knows that physical records and paper records are an ongoing issue. They've been like that for a while, so we wanted to start with just a quick poll for the group to give you guys, try and get some insight from you all on what your thoughts are. And there are actually 3 questions on this. I think you can only see the first 2. So you guys want to go ahead and vote. Looks like host can't vote, so that's fine. But Dylan is on, and he'll help us go through as we start getting some of the results from that. And really, I think the big focus today is on digitization. As everybody knows, we're really moving forward sort of into a digital transformation that's undergoing at a lot of law firms that we work at. A lot of firms are at different places in that journey. Some are just beginning, some have not even really considered it, and some firms are very, very much fully digital no longer sending anything to offsite storage, reducing that footprint, reducing their storage costs, and really kind of streamlining their records process by going as much digital as possible. Again, that'll vary depending firm to firm, but we work with the whole spectrum. So I think that's one of the values that comes with Forrest is that we deal with all levels of IG maturity and digital, the digital transformation as well.
Just encourage everybody to take a couple, maybe 30 seconds to just give a quick answer to those 3 questions for Forrest Solutions. Thank you very much.
I think this is a pretty good sample set group of attendees we have here. Would probably have a good insight into this versus some of the other people that we deal with.
Good
okay. So yeah, here's our results. It looks like 20 to 30% of the physical space is devoted to file storage. I think that's a pretty high number, but that's in line with what we would expect. The estimated budget, that varies again, depending on how you handle your records, whether you do have an offsite vendor, whether you have everything on site, and really where your office is located. And I think, what we're going to do is we will get back, we'll kind of return to each one of these questions as we work through this presentation. And I see on the retrieval of typical box or file, 6 hours to a day seems to be the majority there, which is a good total. So Dylan, yeah, let's go ahead and move forward. So I think it's important to note here that the reason we're even having this discussion is because of the Rule 1.15 of the ABA Model Rules of Professional Conduct. It really just establishes the attorneys and all of their administration's responsibility with client files and records, and to maintain those, keep them secure, keep them safe, and keep them for the duration that they might be needed for any business transactions. Paper-based systems are it requires a lot more manual work. There's a lot more time spent looking and retrieving files. So digital is really the way that most firms are moving. But there is sort of this legacy mindset that's stuck around for a long time of it's just better safe than sorry to keep this, which has led to many firms just keeping everything forever. And we hope to kind of help diagnose that issue and how to solve it.
Yeah, and the hybrid work environments have, basically presented a sort of a unique set of, sort of challenges once the pandemic hit back in 2020 of accessibility and mainly security. So those 2 topics really kind of got to the forefront with, people working from home and how do they access their information? How do they access these paper records that, typically were in the office? And how can you do that securely? So those are some of the other items that we're going to try to address a little bit later as well.
So I think, this is a really important slide because sometimes the costs associated with paper aren't really fully understood and can sometimes be hidden. There is a wide range of costs that come, but I do like this quote that the cost of a lost record could be anywhere from $150 to $200, depending on the year and data type. But as many of us know in the industry, it depends on the record and it depends on the file. It could be substantially more. I think I've got a great quote from an AM Law 100 partner saying, the cost of one lost file could be the same cost as an entire digitization effort. And that really depends on the type of file that's the record that might be lost. And again, the legacy practices and the legacy thought have led to 10 to 20% of office space still being dedicated to filing.
Yeah. Oh,
then I want to just go to some of the financial costs too.
okay. Oh, that was okay. I'm sorry, I thought I had the risk and compliance. Yeah, so obviously real estate is a huge portion of the equation when we're talking about paper records. And obviously in a lot of places that I'm sure everyone on this call are located, real estate prices are not cheap. So dedicating a large portion of that to paper records is not ideal financially for most firms. So, it's definitely a motivating factor in the digitization process as well. And then also from a risk and compliance standpoint as well, definitely poses some issues, especially as far as like security is concerned and access controls, who can access those records. From a compliance standpoint, a lot of times files are kept in, file cabinets and hallways, in unsecured areas, which, can obviously bring up some risk, issues that would, potentially need to be addressed. And we also, yeah, so those are really the two key points that I kind of wanted to bring up with that. So,
Thanks, Casey.
yeah.
And so this is just a quick overview of why reducing the physical footprint of your file storage could be advantageous. I think it's estimated that you can have 5 to 10 linear feet of paper created every year for the average attorney, if that's, they're still doing things the traditional way and using a lot of paper. But 15% is a lot, and any reduction that you can get there can result in a pretty large amount of financial savings. And that's why, I think we were somewhere around between the 20 to 30 in our poll. And the average firm is about 15%, but it does range in that 10 to 20 range. So we're going to get to the real heart of our presentation here on, the smarter strategies and why it's important to move forward with a digital effort here. So there are 5 really good reasons why scanning and digitization can transform your legal practice, and this applies to partners as well as administrators and facility managers. You get faster access to critical information. As Casey mentioned, you get enhanced security. It kind of simplifies your case management, especially if you're using a records management system. They can integrate with your document management system. Freeing up office space. That's just having more space makes people feel more comfortable. As firms try to get people back into the office, it's nice to come into a nice open office. Traditionally, if you had file cabinets and filing shelves spread out throughout the halls, it kind of looks a little bit cluttered and can feel cluttered and kind of claustrophobic. So anytime you get additional space, it's a mental thing as well. And then obviously business continuity and disaster recovery. If your files are digital, you're not as susceptible to natural events, natural hazards.
Yeah, and from a real world, sort of perspective and tangible perspective, less time is spent looking for files, which obviously increases productivity for our team and also our clients or the end users and attorneys as well. Where they're sitting there waiting for files to kind of come in. So if we already have those digitized, it obviously, speeds up the process and increases productivity all around. You obviously have the peace of mind that your data is secure and, accessible and, compliant and hopefully stored correctly. A more agile and connected legal team is important. And it also helps kind of enable the remote hybrid work environment that most of us are in at this point. Again, from an accessibility standpoint, when you're in office, hey, I have this file, you have to bring it over to so-and-so. When everything is electronic, it obviously just makes things a lot easier and a lot more accessible for, everyone involved in the process. And we also,
yeah. You can go to the next slide, Bill.
Yeah, I was going to say from the BCP standpoint as well. So, yeah.
So digitization, it depends on how you decide to do it, but usually it's a 4-step process. I personally think that one of the most important parts of the process is the discovery and classification. We'll return to this a little bit later, but due diligence and audits of your existing file system, your existing file index, is really important because garbage in, garbage out. So if you're starting with a mess and you're just going to say, let's just digitize everything, well, then you're going to end up with a digital mess. So really trying to drill into, how you're going to classify files, what kind of index you're going to build, especially if you don't have a records management system in place right now. And you'd be surprised there are still a number of large firms that don't have one. So we start with the discover, classify, everything gets digitized, and then The real impactful reduction comes from the destruction, which can either be because of its research retention period, or because it's just no longer, they should never have been kept in the records room to begin with. Go ahead and move forward. Casey, you got some real world experience with each of these.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do we get there? How do we digitize? So one of the things we recommend to a lot of our clients is to obviously utilize the equipment that you do have on hand. So I think most folks on the call probably have MFDs that are available. So that's a starting point. Obviously speed is the key thing with the MFDs, and obviously helps move the process along a lot quicker. Typically, the other option you can look at are dedicated scanners, which are usually typically like desktop or flatbed scanners. The benefit of those is that a lot of times you can kind of QC as you go along, because you have the screen. So as you're scanning, you're able to kind of double check your work to make sure that, hey, I have all the pages and all that, the page count is correct. And you're checking for any, pages that may have been tilted or what have you. So you can kind of QC as you go along. So that's one of those benefits. One of the other huge things we have to make sure that folks are doing is OCRing. Just because we've actually run across clients that have actually scanned a ton of their work and their items, and it's not searchable, right? So then it kind of defeats the purpose of the process as far as increasing efficiency and accessibility. If you're not OCRing, then you're kind of missing a little bit of the point. Document indexing is obviously huge as well. You want to make sure that things are coded correctly, and so that when you go into OCR and search, you can find things where they're supposed to be and that they're labeled correctly, so that if they're in your DMS, they're structured properly and have the have the right documentation attached, so that you can find these things quickly. And then the other piece too is you also want to make sure that your documents are PDF'd and and or converted into a format that's accessible with any of the DMS, or shared drives where you may be storing these things kind of going forward. So next slide.
And I love this stat. Digital files can take up obviously 99% less physical space because they are on a server somewhere. They can be either on-site infrastructure or in the cloud. But retrieval time is significantly reduced when you have access to digital files versus physical files. And that can be as simple as files that are stored even on site. It takes time for the records clerk to go find the file, review the request, make sure they pull the right box, go through the box, find the file. When it's as easy as a couple clicks away, it significantly reduces the amount of time it takes to do that, which adds to efficiency. And I think we kind of hit on some of these already. You're reclaiming office space. There's going to be financial value in that with real estate. Enhancing security. The counter side of that is that obviously if everything's digital, you do need to make sure that you have a really robust information security practice, and you're doing everything you can to protect your data on that side. But again, you're not as exposed to natural disasters, you're not as exposed to human error, and the ability to adhere to discovery requests, and especially the litigation hold process through digital systems, is much better. So on this one, disposition destruction protocols, this is what I assume most people on this call understand what a retention policy is. It's important for these policies to be written down, for them to be updated as the time comes, updated regularly if there's any changes to the regulatory environment, if there's anything that's going on in the specific law firm industry. But really, you need to make sure that you have a really solid documented process. That's most often included in a retention schedule, but it can also be its own, sort of disposition workflow. And coming up with those disposition workflows is an important part of any, as a part of the life cycle of any record. And it's important that it's all applied consistently. I feel like Casey and I always come, whenever we get involved with the firm, there's always somebody who's not going to follow the rules or said that they don't have to, these rules don't adhere to them. and they can keep what they want, however they want. So it's important to, really establish at the ground level, and then have executives, executive stakeholder support in driving home that, this is the policy. It needs to be followed consistently for it to be legally defensible. And Casey, I think we did cover some of those enhanced security, but there's a couple good ones in there too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the design. So I think yeah, Andrew, encryption is probably the biggest thing, right? I think that's one of the key items from a security standpoint, is that making sure that this information, when it's being digitized, is it's safe and protected kind of going forward. And then one of the other key points as well is sort of the audit trails and being able to see who's touched the data and when, and in case we do have to sort of defend that or produce that information as part of a legal hold or a discovery process. So and then the last piece, I think, is the cross-team collaboration. Again, digitizing allows for a ease of access to information that obviously wasn't there when everything was just kind of paper, and obviously just helps keep everyone a little bit more connected and make everyone a little bit more efficient.
So like really what comes up to is next is, where do you start? And I think that's sometimes the biggest hurdle in this process. We'll cover costs later, but like, where do you start and when do you start? It's really easy. You can start with the low hanging fruit of redundant or obsolete files is the first step to reducing those costs. But as you continue down that path, that due diligence piece that I noted before, and that file audit, that catalog and assessment, that's a pretty labor intensive process if you want to do it right, especially if you don't have a very solid, accurate accounting for all of your physical files. We have, I personally have dealt with some firms that have had stuff in off-site storage for 10 years. None of the logs for those storage sites and those storage vendors really make much sense to anybody. So going through and having an indexing process in place, and doing that full inventory of what's there, and then kind of figuring out, okay, where does it need to go, and creating that digitization workflow, and the focus being data minimization. And then again, as I said, that retention policy must be established, well written, legally defensible, but it should still support your primary business objectives. And if you do it right, it should be helping you move towards that digital transformation. There you go, next slide.
All right. So yeah, from this perspective, I know when we're engaging clients and having these discussions, the number one issue is cost, right? And everyone is concerned with that. With digitization, obviously you're incurring a lot larger of an upfront cost, right? That's usually amortized when you're typically just having something sent off to storage and it's there for 20, 30 years. The cost annually is minimal, but when you track it from a long-term perspective, you're going to be, you're probably going to be spending a lot more money on that storage cost than if you would have just kind of taken a hit up front. So that's something that we always kind of want to discuss with our clients and say, hey, yeah, you're going to have to deal with this stuff at some point. At some point you kind of have to just kind of draw a line in the sand. So that's usually the biggest, prohibitor from people sort of engaging in the digitization. So what we typically, again, like to do is just kind of show that ROI, and typically between 12 to 18 months is when you start seeing that ROI from engaging in one of these processes. Another one of the issues is staffing, right, to perform these kind of duties. And a lot of times, folks try to get a little creative and say, hey, we'll engage legal assistants or paras when they have downtime. First off, those folks are normally not happy about that, being volunteered to kind of take on these additional duties. And then you also just face some challenges as far as like continuity. One person starts working on it and someone else picks up. So those are obviously challenges that we kind of want to avoid. So typically looking at outsourcing this process is a much better solution just because you have a dedicated staff that this is what they're doing. They've been trained to do this. They're experts. And we also can provide a level of scalability, which is nice as well. So if we need to kind of speed up the process, or you know, there's additional material added to the process and we still need to meet a deadline, we're able to kind of scale up and scale down to kind of meet those demands. And then the last issue is really of, you know, sort of space to kind of perform these duties. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, you know, trying to leverage, you know, current equipment and current, you know, unused space areas, you know, are the direction we try to point our clients in typically. And, you know, obviously, again, if, you know, if we have the opportunity, engaging additional equipment is great, but, you know, obviously leveraging what's in-house already is the way to go. So.
Yeah, and I think, you know, getting creative with, you know, the space too, right? If you've got a large room or large meeting room that nobody uses anymore because it's dark or it's on a lower floor, or, you know, you're moving floors and you've got a bunch of stuff that's been sitting for a while, you know, office moves or even just, you know, shifts are a really good sort of catalyst to get the digitization process going.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we, you know, we've worked with a number of firms doing digitization, but we've got a couple that, you know, we've been on their digital journey for a while. We've been, you know, with them on their digital journey for a while now, and you know, from beginning to end, we can really show and see the benefits that have come with that. And I think Casey's got some really good stats here from one of his personal experiences.
Yeah, so this is one of our larger legal clients, a New Jersey-based firm. And I remember sort of first day, you know, sort of being brought on site to kind of take a look at, you know, sort of the pending project. And they had a 30,000 square foot records facility, which was by far the largest that I had ever seen. It looked kind of like an airplane hangar. And, you know, there was kind of stuff everywhere. There were, you know, boxes, there were files on shelves, boxes on the floor, what have you. And basically the task was, hey, we need to get out of this space. Number one, it's inefficient. It's kind of gotten out of control. They had initially, you know, sort of had that space to try to mitigate sending things off site. But that didn't really work. They wound up just kind of having stuff in both places, right? So they had this 30,000 square foot facility. And then they also had, I think, close to 300,000 boxes and in Iron Mountain as well. So, you know, the material was just proliferating and it really just didn't kind of make any sense. So they engaged us to kind of help solve this problem. So, you know, we came in with our team and, you know, and it was really a combination of destruction. Well, first auditing what was there, right? Taking a look at everything that was in that facility and then designating, okay, here's stuff that can be destroyed, that's up for disposition. Here are things that can be returned to the client. And here are things that we are going to wind up sending offsite to storage because they're still active matters that folks are still kind of working on. So we were able to basically get them out of that 30,000 square foot facility into a 10,000 square foot facility within 2 years, which was pretty impressive. And I didn't know if we were going to be able to actually kind of meet those demands, but we were able to kind of get that done, which was amazing. And one of the key pieces of that, which I think Andrew touched on previously, is really having an executive sponsor that can kind of get behind this project and kind of give that encouragement and, you know, and knock on attorney doors when needed and kind of, you know, encourage them to kind of move along and look at reports when we're saying, hey, these things have been closed, nobody's touched this stuff in, you know, 10, 15, 20 years or what have you. Can we finally get this stuff destroyed and out of here? So that was key. This project resulted in a huge cost savings for the client, you know, almost $500,000, which was amazing, and they were very pleased with. Obviously, we were able to, you know, decrease printing and paper costs as well. With, you know, really trying to, you know, one of the other key aspects of this project was enforcing the retention schedule. It existed, and I'm sure a lot of you probably face this issue as well. You may have a retention schedule, but it's not being enforced. So that was another key part that, myself and the rest of the team kind of came in and did, was saying, hey, you guys put this time, effort, and energy into developing this policy. Let's make sure it's being followed so that we're not continuing to go down the path of, paper, and sending things off site. So yeah, it was a great project. We were able to lower costs just in general, and then we were also able to kind of downsize the staff that was working within the records and the IG department. We went from 16 folks down to 12 as well, which also resulted in some additional cost savings for the client. So,
yeah, thanks, Casey. That's one of our big success stories, just because of the sheer size and volume of that one was something that we had not seen before.
Yeah.
And hopefully don't see again.
Yes, absolutely.
So, I think it would be remiss of us if we don't directly address, the offsite storage solution. I think Casey kind of hinted at it there, where there was a, so we've got a poll here just to see what you guys think about your offsite storage vendors. And I'm really interested to see how everybody falls on this, because it's kind of a mixed bag when we go in and start doing some of that due diligence and analysis. So we'll give everybody a couple seconds here to vote.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's probably going to be mostly on the last two choices.
Yeah, I threw that last one in
agree.
just because I've heard that analogy quite a few times, and I've seen it in practice too. So yeah. Oh, okay. So this is pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's at least somebody in here feels like a hostage. And it's good to see a very happy, somewhat happy. Just okay. That kind of is understandable. I think every vendor has their strengths and weaknesses. But we want to sort of highlight, some of the considerations that should go into your your digital strategy or your digital transformation goals. And one of those is really trying to find a way to reduce as much stuff you have offsite as possible. So yeah, Dylan, let's jump into that first slide, because I think this one hits home for me specifically, just because I think Casey hinted at it when we were going over sort of the case study, is the myth of cheaper offsite. It might be cheap at first, but over time that cost adds up. And if you just continually send stuff and don't retrieve stuff and remove it permanently from offsite storage, those long-term costs do add up quite a bit and can lead to increased inefficiencies in data access, delays in getting data. One of the things that we see often now is where you have a client that's leaving the firm and they want their files, but they don't want 38 boxes shipped to their site or to their new firm. They want all of that transmitted in a share file site digitally. So that is going to be, I think that's a trend we're going to continue to see, is people saying, I don't want my physical files back. I don't want 30 boxes. I have nowhere to put that. So that's one of the sort of the myths, is that it's cheaper to keep it there, but there are additional costs that come with that. And on the next slide, we'll get into some specific details. But the risk of offsite storage, again, is loss, stuff that's outside of your control. Most vendors are really, really good about auditing and tracking. They have their own sort of built-in software tools to help you manage and understand what you have in their storage facilities. And an example that recently popped up for us was, a particular offsite vendor does have a software that they use that their clients can use, but it's not very much user friendly and it doesn't integrate with any of the other tools. So it's sort of like an outside of the normal workflow process to then go do everything through that vendor's site using their software tool and tracking and trying to make sure that it always mirrors. And then, like the modern alternatives is selective digitization. That's really what we're proposing here. You don't have to digitize everything. You really want to make a decision. Should it be destroyed? Should it be digitized? Is it unnecessary? Do we need to keep this data? And that's one of that, again, where that executive stakeholder, having them have that input and driving that goal and that project really does help make those decisions a little bit quicker, and will result in, I think much more concrete results.
Oh, and one other quick thing, Andrew,
Yeah.
just in regards to off-site storage, which I can't, sort of stress enough. We've seen many clients as well, sort of not paying attention to their contract and their terms and the SLAs and the costs, contracts getting auto-renewed, terms changing, SLAs changing, especially with the pandemic. Most firms prior to that, and especially in the tri-state, you requested a file before 11 a.m., you got it the same day. Once kind of COVID hit and, and folks were in the office and workforce got reduced and all that stuff, those SLAs changed dramatically. Whereas, you order a file now, you may not get it for a day or two, right, under regular delivery terms. So, one of the things we just wanted to really stress as well is just really monitoring your off-site storage contract and the SLAs and costs involved with that as well, just because we've seen it too many times where clients are like, hey, I had no idea my costs had gone up by, 10 or 15% from, the last contract because it just auto-renewed and no one was kind of minding the shop. So.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And that gets sort of into the next slide here too, on really what we're calling the unseen or often unknown. I mean, you hope that they're known, but really it can be staggering sometimes to read through those contracts when we're sort of doing that due diligence and see all of the additional fees that can be included in simply trying to retrieve a box. There's a retrieval cost, there's a shipping cost, there's a fuel surcharge. If you're in New York City, there's an additional toll charges for delivering of the box. So like what those all come down to, I refer to it as permanent removal costs. That can sometimes that's another one of those areas where that upfront cost can be staggering and really be inhibit the digitization efforts. So like we've got an example here, average firm of 100 attorneys pays $10,000 a month, but 80% of what they have in their offsite storage is of no retention value. And another one that I recently dealt with was a mid-sized firm, about 250 attorneys. They were spending over $30,000 a month for their offsite storage costs. That included their shred bins and some of the stuff that they were still using, but they hadn't sent anything offsite in over a decade. And that was it kind of was shocking to me. Like, why are you paying for this if it's been sitting there for 10 years? Most of the retention periods on everything that would be there are already lapsed, and everything there should be disposed and likely destroyed. And it wasn't stuff like wills, trusts, estates. It was just everything at one point when they were moving offices got shipped off site, and then everything that they had at that vendor, when they decided they could get better costs with somebody else, just got moved to the other vendor. And that other vendor then upped their costs 3 years later based on the market trend. So they were spending $30,000 a month just to store stuff that they no longer needed, but the cost to retrieve it, if you added everything up, was over $8 a box, and that's on the low end. We've seen some costs, and I think we get into it on the next on our ROI, of up to $12 just to permanently remove a box of your stuff. And again, that's why I added that. Sometimes you can feel like a hostage. It's because really you have to pay so much to just get your stuff back, when in reality, I think, and I hope that the vendors start moving towards this digitization. I mean, they want to do it for you themselves, but they are often very costly in that process as well. So I think we get to the next slide here, and it's a good sort of overview of why outsourcing is a good solution to many of these problems. Specifically to the offsite vendors, a lot of outsourcing organizations work directly with the vendors and have good relationship with vendors, and can help navigate that process of renegotiating their fees, Some companies will even put out an RFP to try to get lower prices, just because the goal would be to get that price point for permanent removal of a box just to a point where it isn't so high that it prevents you from ever doing anything. And that's really kind of returning to what we were asking in some of the earlier slides or the earlier poll. Firms spend an estimated 3 to 7% of their annual budget on records management. That may include, for some firms, their offsite storage. It should, and that seems a little low. But I think some of the results we had earlier were a little bit higher than that. But I think that really comes down to how much you have digitally stored, how much stuff you have in offsite storage. And one of the other sort of key hidden costs that I forgot to mention is really that the removal of the box. Some people, you can rebox, so there's strategies that can get around it, and we've kind of we get creative when we need to try and help our clients reduce physical while not incurring a crazy amount of costs, or like going above their monthly maximum or monthly minimum of what they can pull back.
Yeah, the reusing of the boxes is key. That's a good point, Andrew. So what a lot of our clients will do, or what we'll advise them to do, is to bring back material that's eligible for disposition. Bring that stuff back. You have shred bins on site. You shred that information, shred those documents, and then you reuse that box number for new material that is then going off site, so that you're not incurring that permanent withdrawal fee for that box. You still have that same box. You just have different material within it. So you're saving that cost of having to pay for the permanent withdrawal fees by, getting a little creative and performing some of that function, on site yourself.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we don't want to come across here is like, we're not marketing our services, because I think any outsourcing provider is going to give a law firm value. It just has to be, you need to take into consideration what you're looking for in a vendor. Whether they do have those on-site, off-site, or they do have those off-site vendor relationships. Whether they do more than just records, whether there's mailroom scanning, reprographics, because a lot of that could come into play if you decide to go down that digital transformation. And then I think the compliance assurance. One of the things that you get with using an outsourced solution is that you can guarantee their compliance. Knowledge transfer is a little bit more of an easier part. You're not training new employees all the time. That's on the outsourced provider, and they are doing their best to educate and train their employees as they come on, and they have set practices and best practices around that. As Casey and I can attest, having some subject matter experts in information governance can really help a firm decide on what's the best path forward for their physical documents.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's one more on there. I think just obviously lowering the overall costs. It's estimated that 15 to 40% could be you get lower costs depending on your geography, SLA performance, and Casey hit on this one earlier, specifically with the benefits of key function scalability. Being able to scale up and scale down as needed, whether there's a rush to get something done, or it's going to take a long time, you'd rather do it in a shorter period of time. So the scalability of outsourced providers does give a lot of flexibility to firms to really dictate their own schedules and timelines. And again, this is just because this is where I spend a lot of my time, is in the due diligence world, and in the the on-site audit overview. I mean, this is a pretty detailed overview of what we would do, or what you should expect an outsourced records management provider to do, to come in and figure out what needs to be reviewed, what needs to be logged, what needs to be, how is your index being created? Do you have a retention schedule? Do you need help with that? If it's not being enforced, sometimes outside providers, that can be an impetus to get additional traction within the firm. And then, custom proposals focus on data minimization and remediation. There is a lot that goes into just planning, and then the planning process of a digitization effort. and a reduction in your physical files or your physical records. But that's step one. And really this approach should follow as each step goes on. And the solution should be something that's, not cost prohibitive, includes all of the relevant information that you need to make the right decision. And then, to gain that executive stakeholder support that we keep hitting on, you got to sell them on the reasons for doing it. All right, I think you can go to the next one, and then, yeah, this is our last one here.
Yeah, so we kind of touched on this earlier regarding sort of costs and the expense of sort of engaging in this type of process, digitization process. So we just kind of wanted to kind of point out a real world example. Again, this is a smaller sort of boutique firm that we were dealing with, and kind of advising them on sort of what their options were. So like, first one was do nothing, right? Just continue to kind of do what you're doing, and laid out sort of the roadmap for that, and said, hey, in 10 years you're going to spend 1.4 million bucks on storage, right? For the long term. Option two, sending things off site, right? So hey, get rid of the things that you currently have on site. Let's just send everything to storage. And that'll solve our real estate, because they were looking at an upcoming move, and trying to figure out what they were going to do with the material that they did have on site. So with that, the calculation was basically, hey, send everything off site, and over 10 years with assuming a 5% increase, you're looking at $2.5 million, $2.6 million. Option three was basically a combination of, and this is what we recommended, obviously, was a combination of digitization and destruction. And the initial outlay for that is, $340,000, which is significant and a lot of money. But when you look at that compared to sort of the 10-year futures that we projected out for them, it was the more economical, sort of way to go. And obviously, it's tough to swallow in a 1-year annual budget, but when you look at it long term, you're saving a tremendous amount of money by engaging in a strategy that helps adhere to your retention schedule, and also increase the efficiency, accessibility, and security that digitization provides you. So we just wanted to kind of throw out a quick sort of real world example just to show what that looks like. So
yeah, and I think that brings us to the end here. Just some quick recap of some of the main points that we talked on. You go to the next slide, Dylan. So key takeaways: obviously enhanced visibility, control. We've just talked about reduced costs quite a bit. Obviously mitigating risks, enhanced security, regulatory compliance, increase efficiency. I think that's one that's pretty obvious. I think another one that isn't on here, but it's also, you can help reduce your carbon footprint and your sustainability efforts. And if you have clients that are tracking their carbon footprint and publicizing that data, they want their vendors, they want their law firms that represent them to be doing the same. So that's a great sort of another additional sale point is you're gonna help save save some trees. Except the idea of digitization is really to kickstart and accelerate your digital transformation. I think the goal of most firms should be within the next 5 to 10 years to be as fully digital as possible, because then that allows you to use some of the really advanced AI tools. We're starting to see those AI tools come into play now, in going through large sets of records data to see what could be set aside or what could be pulled for immediate destruction, what doesn't have any value, applying retention schedules, going through your DMS. And if you haven't had a document type that would be a trigger for retention, an AI tool can go through and give you kind of a summary and then help you apply that on the back end. And then really, I think, focus on key initiatives by going with an outsourced provider to do something like a digitization or manage your records or take over your records management teams. It allows you to focus on additional, client facing and, firm efficiencies, larger, IT integrations, it just frees up that manpower and really gives everybody an opportunity to spend more time on client-facing work. And I think I'll finish there. I'll let Casey finish if he's any other takeaways, and then I know we've got on the next slide. I think we've got a QR code for two self-assessment worksheets that really one's IG focused, one's digital, really about digitization. So we're happy to share those. And as we said, I think we'll send out the slides and a recording of this as well. But I'll let you close it out, Casey, and then we can open up for some questions and answers.
Yeah, no, I think most of these points, sort of cover, the key areas. The one other thing, again, I'll just, like to stress and, return to is, that executive, sort of sponsorship is key. So if you can get your COOs, your CIOs on board with these initiatives, that helps tremendously kind of push things forward and, providing that buy-in. And and really, and obviously, just sort of speaking to your audience, right? So, whichever stakeholder group that you're kind of speaking to, making sure that you address issues and concerns that are top of mind for them, right? So from from an IT perspective, obviously security is key and paramount. From an attorney perspective, sort of the risk. One of the things we touched on, earlier as well was, Andrew had mentioned is, the attorneys typically, hey, let's just keep everything forever, right? Like we're going to hold on to this stuff forever, which obviously isn't, fiscally responsible, and from a risk management, standpoint isn't great either, because, obviously you expose yourself to risk for holding on for documents and information that you should have destroyed years ago. You open yourself up to that risk. So yeah, just really, being able to get that executive sponsorship, and then when you're talking to those different stakeholder groups, making sure that you just highlight causes that are top of mind for them. So
Good stuff. I like the QR codes. So I'll ask a question. I mean, obviously, the law business has changed, and all law firms receive RFPs, from outside corporations and counsel and so forth. Is it fair to assume that a lot of these big companies are going to be, expecting to see, robust electronic, IT and records management programs, versus, and do they have, questions aligned with, specific information they're trying to pull out to show what the law firm does, to manage their and other important records?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, there's two parts to that. One is that if you can, I think for a lot of clients, knowing that the digital record is the record of truth, and not the physical paper, that's one of the important things. Is in order to be able to demonstrate that to a potential client, is being able to discuss your digital strategy, and how you digitize everything that can be, and how you're being secure with their data. I don't think, I mean, obviously we don't pass costs on to clients for offsite storage, the same way that you would pass them on to for your digital storage, but being able to really demonstrate that your proficiency in the digitization in the digital world right now is going to be a selling point. And I think that's something that we will see more of in RFPs, is a focus on the digital strategy.
This is great information, you all. I mean, if somebody was going to need to go from start to finish on a records regeneration program, this would be outstanding information, very relevant to what we're all, dealing with in the past, and what's going to be necessary in the future. We really appreciate you guys coming on board. Thanks for the excellent information. And we'll look forward to some future webinars with Forrest Solutions. Thanks for being our sponsor.